So this morning at stand-up meeting, Venerable Sultram was giving the motivation. And part of her motivation was saying, well, let's become Buddhas so we can help all other sentient beings become Buddhas too, so that they can then also benefit other sentient beings. And I went, wow, that sounds like a pyramid scheme. It's a virtuous pyramid scheme, but I wanted to unpack that thought a little bit more. So what is a pyramid scheme? Traditionally, it's something with financial ties, where one person recruits others and says to those others, pay me a fee, and then you also get to recruit people who will pay you a fee. And so it's a business venture, but maybe there's no business other than recruiting people who pay you a fee. So it's called a pyramid scheme because the idea is that each person is recruiting more people under them, and then those people are feeding money back up. So this idea that we attain Buddhahood to help others attain Buddhahood, and then they'll help others attain Buddhahood, is this a pyramid scheme or not? So first, there's a different motivation. So in a pyramid scheme, the goal is to make money. And if you're really in on it, you kind of know there's some deception involved. And obviously, Buddhism is not about deception. But even then, it's in... Or making money, yes. It was interesting to think about, though, in that when we say those words, may I attain Buddhahood so that we can help others attain Buddhahood too, even though the goals are the same for those two groups of people, us and them, the motivation is different. Why am I trying to attain Buddhahood? So that I can be of greatest benefit to others. Why do I want others to attain Buddhahood? So that they have the greatest possible happiness, so that they really attain, the highest potential of their lives. So it's a little bit different. It's not quite symmetric. It's not, may I attain Buddhahood so that I have the highest happiness, and may those people attain Buddhahood so they help others, right? That doesn't quite feel the same as saying, may I attain Buddhahood to help others. And yes, we know we also then have a lot of happiness, but that's not our primary goal. So that's actually quite different then, in that, in this scheme, we're really thinking of others first for ourselves, and when we think what they're going to do, it's also to benefit them, not to benefit us. So then another big difference is that we don't go around recruiting others intentionally. We don't put signs on telephone poles saying, need money, call this number. We maybe say, need merit, call this number. Need peace in a chaotic world, come to the Abbey. And so, as a faith tradition, we don't go out and proselytize. We don't hand out flyers while standing on the corner. We don't have signs telling people that they're going to be reborn as a hungry ghost. We don't do that. However, we do have teachings on gathering disciples. And so this is different than proselytizing. And it's interesting in that we're taught 4 ways or 4 techniques that are part of gathering disciples. And in this case, disciples would be students, people that we're maybe sharing the Dharma with. And one of them is acting in accord with the teachings. That whatever Dharma teachings we're sharing with others, this is only going to be effective. People are only going to stick around if we're acting in accord with those teachings. And so this is, again, this interesting thing where when we're thinking about the disciples, it's again these people who are being benefited. It's not so that they pay us dana. That is not listed anywhere in the teachings on gathering disciples. It's not about getting dana, getting offerings, having them do anything for us. It's to benefit them. And in fact, in the middle length Lamrim, it's described that if you act in accord with the teachings, the disciples will say, oh, since she herself, I'm changing it there, abides in virtue in which she guides me, there will definitely be benefit and happiness for me if I accomplish it. So again, the disciple isn't about benefiting the teacher, me in this situation, but it's about the disciple being benefited. And so it's also interesting in that the assumption here is that why might we gather disciples It's to benefit them, to teach them the Dharma, to train them in ethical conduct, the way that we have the opportunity to come here and ordain as monastics and train in ethical conduct. It isn't that Venerable Children set out to have us, to set up the Abbey as a membership where we pay her a fee and then we recruit others. There's none of that, right, as you know. And it's interesting in that while, there are these teachings on how to effectively, correctly recruit disciples, I've never seen it mentioned that there's a minimum number of disciples that you must gather to attain Buddhahood. My guess is that that number is actually 0. Because fundamentally, we're working on our own good qualities, and maybe that will include interacting with others who have the karma to find that teacher and really connect. But maybe as we go through our path to Buddhahood, in fact, we maybe might not connect with other people who have the karma to seriously study the teachings and become disciples. And we don't just say, okay, those are my disciples and these are the people I benefit. We certainly see this with Venerable Children. She's not here, so I can totally now use her as an example. This is helpful. With Venerable Children, she benefits anyone she meets. The turkeys, the construction workers, probably anyone who's in the dentist reception room right now, and she benefits us, her disciples, and we're very fortunate for that. But, her good actions are for absolutely everyone. There's no like application to fill out to get into the club of people Venerable Children is going to help. And part of the benefiting, again, where this idea of disciples comes in, is that as Venerable Children goes through the world and wants to benefit others, part of that is sharing the Dharma. And not necessarily converting people to Buddhism, but as we see with so many of the general teachings that she does, how we share on offering service Saturday or sharing the Dharma Day, people who come who are not Buddhist, maybe they identify as Christian or Jewish or nothing in particular, they still can benefit from hearing the Buddha's teachings explained, learning how to work with their mind, learning how to not be angry all the time by thinking about the world in a different way. So I don't think that this is a pyramid scheme. I did come to that conclusion, and that's maybe pretty obvious, but I think these differences are really important to see that, yes, even though there's an individual like Venerable Children who is benefited by her teachers, who we can see are well on their way to Buddhahood, and now she is well on her way to Buddhahood, and we're benefiting from her, and then we pass that on to others. You can kind of imagine, this almost family tree of Buddhist teachers and disciples, where Shakyamuni Buddha taught these people and they gained high realizations, and they went on and taught these people who gained high realizations. It gets a little complicated with rebirth, because then, maybe a teacher ends up being the student in their next life of the person, there's some weird loops in this family tree. But it still maybe would look like a pyramid. And it's beautiful to think about the fact that if you, go forward enough in time, that bottom rung of the pyramid of people on their way to Buddhahood, getting closer and closer and eventually attaining it, would include every sentient being. That this pyramid eventually will contain every being, because one way or another, every being, since this will go for eternity, limitless time, every being will meet the Dharma, practice the Dharma, and progress along the path to Buddhahood. So that's perhaps the one way it is like a pyramid scheme, in that you can align the people like a pyramid, but it's much better in that you don't get to a point and have it all collapse because, people have caught on to the scheme. But in fact, it will go on indefinitely until everyone attains Buddhahood.